Hello, I'm Kurt Wilson, City Manager for the City of Stockton, California. Water and questions about water quality are on everyone's minds lately. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Mel Lytle, Stockton's Municipal Utilities Director, to have a conversation about Stockton's water, and the sources, and how we deliver clean, safe, reliable drinking water to our customers each and every day. This is a great opportunity for us to come out here and have a quick conversation about water.
Well, I'd be happy to help you out there.
So between drought issues and other issues, water is one of those things that seems to be in everyone's mind. So that's a good thing. And I know from your side, you've got all this expertise in water. And normally people don't ask you all these wonderful questions about water. So we're glad to have the opportunity.
Well, glad to be here as Director of the Utilities. Absolutely welcome you out to the Delta Water Supply Treatment Plant. As you can see, it's a very advanced facility that was recently dedicated back in 2012. The City Council dedicated this facility, as you mentioned, the largest public works project the City of Stockton has ever done. It was $223 million, and it was built and began operation on time and under budget.
And it looks very, not only modern, but it looks very energy efficient.
That's correct. The building that we're in right now actually received what's called LEED Gold certification because of its energy savings ability.
So tell us a little bit about sort of why the plant was built in the first place and where Stockton gets its water from.
Lots of folks are very interested as far as where water comes from. Water plays such a major role in all of our lives because we drink it, we bathe, we cook with it, all these sort of things. And so it's no wonder that water and water quality are right at the top of everyone's priorities often. Mm-hmm. And so the City of Stockton, many years ago, decided that in order to make sure that we had the best quality water as well as adequate water supply for the city and its citizens, the planning for this Delta Water Supply project went forward.
During the drought, would we have been in as good a position to deliver water to our citizens if we didn't have the plant?
No, not at all. I think that the portfolio that we've developed, let me describe that a little bit in the sense that we can take water from 5 different sources now. One being the groundwater, one being the Stanislaus River through New Maloney's Reservoir, as well as the Calaveras River through New Hogan Reservoir. That water flows through the Stockton East drinking water treatment plant and into the city. And then now with the Delta Water Supply Project, we can take obviously water from the Delta as well as from the McCollum River through Woodbridge Irrigation District. And so that allows us to really be able to make sure that we have the quality and the quantity of water for the city into the future.
Great. So for here at the plant, where does the water come from?
Here at this plant, it depends. It depends on the day, but we can take water from 2 sources. One being the McCollum River up near Lodi through a series of canals. We can bring water to the plant where it's treated. Or if you go out into the Delta at the end of Empire Track, we have a pumping station there that pumps water out of the Delta into a pipeline that brings it all the way to this plant, about 12 miles, where it's treated as well.
Fantastic. So now you said it's treated. So why is water treated? So, we go out there and we see the water. How come we can't just use it? What's the purpose behind treating water?
Why do we treat water? Is because water contains a variety of things. If you watch when it rains, a lot of times streams can get muddy looking, or if you look out into the other areas, you can see they maybe turn green at some time or get mossy, or all the various factors that rely on the sun and energy and all the things that cause water to have different quality. And so with that comes regulations that the state and federal government have put in place throughout the United States that says you have to, if you're going to serve water to the community, you have to meet certain water quality standards, including disinfection. we began taking water from streams and creeks and all the various ways here in the United States. But with that also came the potential for waterborne diseases. And so the federal government set those standards in place so that when you have water that's being served to the public, it has to be treated to a level that allows for the adequate disinfection of the water so that it's safe for folks to drink and use and all that sort of thing.
So you said the federal government. So is water treatment highly regulated?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We operate here at this plant through a permit that's given to us by the state, and they're following US EPA regulations as well. We also have on-staff operators that operate the plant that have to maintain their license through the state that qualifies them to operate the plant as well. So it's a sophisticated thing to make sure that we ensure the adequate water quality for folks here in Stockton.
So it sounds like you have a lot of experts who've spent, they're professionals who've spent their whole career on water issues and the science behind it, and they seem to be very good at what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're great professionals as far as that's concerned. They're always learning about new things and developing new talents and skills to maintain their licenses. And oftentimes, it's really a very difficult area to recruit folks. And we're always interested in folks that may want to join us in the water industry sometime in the future as a career path.
That sounds fantastic. So it sounds pretty complicated, and I'm sure sometimes things don't go quite as planned. So recently we had an issue related to disinfection byproducts where we had some notices go out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In water treatment, one of the final stages for treatment is disinfection. Water treatment, as it goes through the process, we use a series of processes that allows us to take out all the various constituents that are in the water. Sand and dirt and other floating materials, as well as other organics and other things like that. A lot of it settles out of the water, and as we go through the treatment process, the water gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner to a point where it's ready to disinfect and put out into the system.
The water from the Delta comes in, follows a pipeline along 8 Mile Road. It comes in right over in this building that you can see down to the south of us. That's where it's treated with ozone. It's an ozonation building, and ozone is treated as an initial disinfectant in order to take out a lot of the impurities that are in the system, in the water that's coming from the Delta. It travels in a pipeline up to the end of this facility. These are primary settling tanks here. Look down in the water and see the color is a little milky looking, and that's due to any remaining sediment or other materials that might be there. And what happens is that this facility allows the water to settle out, so the dirt and other organic matter, things like that, are able to settle down to the bottom, where we clean the tanks out on a regular basis. And then the water is forced up into these, what they call plate settlers. And as the water is forced up, it dumps out all that sediment load, and then you can see the water collecting in these troughs here. These troughs are with that water. Then it takes the water out of this facility and over into the ultrafiltration building. What you see in this building is our membrane filtration process. Water from the flocculation sed basin comes over here and then is brought into the building and split out into these various pipes that you see. And it's actually, the water is taken and forced through a series of very, very small membrane tubes that continue to filter the water even to a higher degree. And so what you see here, there's the racks, what they call racks, and that's where the actual membrane occurs, where the water passes through the membrane, removes additional organic matter or any other impurities before it's actually taken out of this building and sent down for disinfection before it goes to the citizens of the city.
Here in the city of Stockton, we've used free chlorine disinfection for many, 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 many years. We're taking chlorine as a gas and then injecting it into the water. So free chlorine ions are floating around in the water at a very, very, very low concentration to ensure that the water that leaves this plant is safe when it gets to folks' tap.
Now, some people say, oh my goodness, chlorine in the water, I don't understand, that doesn't sound right. Is this something that, Stockton made up? Is this something that's new?
No, actually, this is the requirement of the state and federal government, that water is disinfected so that it's safe for folks to drink and use. And so we're not doing anything that's outside of the norm. It's a standard practice. It's been a standard practice for many, many, many years throughout the United States and other areas of the world. You mentioned an issue called disinfection byproducts. We sent out a notice to the cities of folks here in the city of Stockton late last year about a potential violation of what they call disinfection byproducts. US EPA, I think it was back in 1998, came forward with a regulation that said if you use chlorine, oftentimes there may be in the treatment process little tiny microscopic particles of organic matter. What is that? Maybe it's a tiny little piece of algae that was left over in the treatment process, or other types of organic chemical. What happens is if water is left in our distribution system, in our pipelines, for a long time, that chlorine can find that organic matter and bond to it.
So the organic matter is in there in the water to begin with, and
Right.
the stuff that you're using, the chemical that you're using to keep the water clean for folks, sometimes reacts with it?
Sometimes that organic, it's when you treat it to such as a high level of quality, you don't get it absolutely perfect. It's not perfectly clean, like you would say distilled water. Distilled water, you don't want to drink distilled water. That's not good for you. It would take the minerals out of your bones. It would be bad for your system. But in this process, what happens is that there's a small amount of organic matter that is either from the treatment plant or in the distribution system, and it bonds with that chlorine. And in some cases, they call those disinfection byproducts. Okay? Those disinfection byproducts, as regulated under the EPA, have stated that if you use water contaminated past 80 parts per billion.
Did you say million or billion?
Billion.
Billion, okay.
Now, just to understand what a billion is, a billion is one blade of grass in a football field size lawn, 1 part per billion. They're regulating the city of Stockton and all here in California at 80 parts per billion. And so it's very, very low amounts that we're currently regulated for. Now what happens is when we do a regular sampling, and if we find that a disinfection byproduct concentration is above that 80 part per billion, we notify folks here in the city of Stockton. And that's what we did just the other day. We found that there were 2 locations in northwest Stockton, one at 82 parts per billion and one at 84 parts per billion.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. The level is 80 and you were at 82.
We were 2 parts per billion above the standard.
So 2 blades of grass in a football field size lawn.
Correct.
Okay.
And so we did what was required by the state, and in part of that, we looked at the reasoning why. Why was it in these locations that we found those small violations? And what we found was in those locations, there's 2 things that are going on. One happens to be that as Stockton developed over the last number of years, we developed our water system as well. But back in 2008, when the economy fell into recession, development also ceased, and it caused our water system to have sort of what we call our dead end areas, our areas where the water doesn't turn over very quickly. And that gives the chlorine and that small amount of organic matter more time to sort of find each other and link up and develop those disinfection byproducts. The other issue is due to this drought that we're in. We're in one of the most significant droughts that we've ever had in California. Mm-hmm. And the folks here in Stockton have been really great about conserving water. But what does that do? It also causes that we use less water, and so the water that's in our pipelines stays there longer. And it gives it a little bit longer time for those chemicals to show up and develop that disinfection byproduct.
So with free chlorine, that longer residency time makes it more likely that we develop these byproducts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we promised in our notice that we would do all our appropriate steps in order to reduce the exposure of disinfection byproducts to citizens here in the city of Stockton. One of them had to deal with changing water sources. We began to pump a little bit more groundwater. It's a little bit less likely to have that type of problem, and so we injected groundwater into our system to make sure that situation was taken care of on the short term. But on the long term, what do? It falls back many years ago as far as planning, as far as the development of this treatment plant. And the fundamental thing that we found was when we did the initial feasibility and analysis here at this plant was that we were going to have to change our disinfection process. Disinfection, I mentioned chlorine. Well, changing the disinfection process, we were changing it from chlorine to chloramine. If you take chlorine and then you take ammonia, very, very, very small amounts, very low concentrations, and allow them to react together, they form what is called a chloramine. It's a little less reactive than free chlorine, but yet it does a very, very, very good job at disinfecting water supply.
So chlorine has already been in the system.
Right.
So by adding the ammonia, that's what causes or creates the chloramine.
Correct.
Okay.
Chloride, the chlorine ion will react with the ammonia ion to form chloramine. It's a little bit more stable, a little less reactive, but does a great job disinfecting our water supply in our distribution system all the way to our taps. And it also, by reacting together, it's much less likely to form disinfection byproducts. And that's what we're really concerned about. And this is an area that the state and federal governments are regulating us on. This isn't something they've asked us as a potential step to move forward on.
So the people who regulate what you do here want you to make these improvements to the system.
Absolutely. And this was planned for. This isn't something we've just concocted overnight as far as this is what we need to do to Stockton to reduce disinfection byproducts. It's a matter of, back in 2007, when this plant was actually began the design process, the design engineers went through all the work necessary to figure out what's the best disinfection process. And when they did that, they said, because we take Delta water, it will be a requirement for us to implement chloramine disinfection.
So what's different with Delta water? So are different sources of water likely to have different things inside them?
Absolutely. I mean, the Delta water, if you've ever been out water skiing in the Delta or fishing or doing any other type of recreation, the Delta is where we get water from lots of different sources. We have water from the San Joaquin River, the Sacramento River, various east side tributaries. It's all sort of collecting in the Delta. And then we also have tidal influences. We have lots of different things. So lots of dynamic things going on there. The Delta is not what they call an oligotrophic area. If I was in Lake Tahoe, that's oligotrophic. Down here in the Delta, we're a little bit different than that. So because we're aware that the water quality in the Delta is different, we we wanted to make sure that we had the best treatment processes possible, as well as disinfection.
So other people pull water out of the Delta, either from Northern California or Southern California. Do they also go through some type of a process?
Absolutely. Folks typically that rely on any Delta water source actually use chloramine disinfection. Here locally, we've got the city of Brentwood, Mountain House, city of Tracy. They all pull water from the Delta. Over in the Bay Area, East Bay Mud, so that's all Oakland and all the East Bay area. City of San Jose through Santa Clara Valley Water District. Those areas, they take water from the Delta. And then if you've ever traveled down along I-5, all the way down to LA, the State Water Aqueduct takes water from Delta all the way down to LA, where 26 or 28 million people drink chloramine disinfected water.
So it sounds like chloramine is a very common thing that's been well vetted and approved by the regulatory agencies, and it sounds like chloramine is something that's so common, a large percentage of people already drink it.
Absolutely. There's no surprise there. I mean, I think it's 20% of folks in the United States drink chloramine treated water. Chloramines were first used to disinfect water back in 1908 in New Jersey. And there's a long history of chloramine disinfection throughout the United States. So it's not something new. It's not something we concocted yesterday to make sure that we don't have disinfection byproducts. But in fact, we've planned for it since the day that this plant was designed. And part of that design, as we finished the treatment plant, we developed the chloramine treatment works that would allow us to do that throughout North Stockton.
So throughout this time period, we've had lots of conversations, not only at the staff level, but the Water Advisory Group, which is a group of citizens who take a close look at water-related issues. And there's the Council Water Committee, and then there's the City Council. Have all those groups been involved in this process?
From the very beginning, as the designs were brought forward, as the plans and project approvals were required, that vetting process occurred as what went through the Water Advisory Group. That's a citizens group that are very interested in water and utility issues. They do a great job at critically reviewing proposals that my staff and consultants develop. And so with that comes Council Water Committee review. They're members of the City Council that sit down with us on a monthly basis and go through all these types of projects, all these types of efforts that we're moving on for recommendation to Council. And then as we bring actual projects and agreements to Council, full Council and Mayor are given the opportunity to thoroughly vet what we bring before them. We're there available for additional discussion as it's brought before Council and either approved or not, or brought back for additional work. So, absolutely.
Gotcha. So on one hand, the plant is this great, modern, cutting-edge facility doing this wonderful service for the community. On the other hand, it sounds like chloramine is simply catching up with where everyone else seems to already be.
In many cases, that's a fact. We wanted to make sure that as we had the treatment plant come online in 2012, we began treating water and moving it into the city of Stockton. One of the ramifications of the drought this last year, we were moving ahead with this project in 2014, but as the drought became more significant, we were concerned about where our water would come from. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the greatest flexibility in being able to move water around the city to make sure our demand could be met. And so we said, well, just wait a minute, we'll hold off on chloramine disinfection in North Stockton until we get a better understanding of how we're going to use the water in the city amongst the city of Stockton, where we're getting water supply from Stockton East, as well as our groundwater wells. And now we have a much better understanding of it in the sense that we've essentially lived through this drought for the last couple of years. We understand where our water supplies can be from. And we feel right now is a very good time to move on the chloramine project to make sure that we have the opportunity to bring the system online before a lot of demand in the summertime, as well as make sure that we meet the needs of our state and federal regulators regarding disinfection byproducts and limiting that out of the water system.
So it sounds like it's been a well thought out process that's included a lot of people. So most of those meetings seem to have been public and they've taken place that way. So I'm sure members of the public have had an opportunity to stay abreast of the issues from that public process. But how else would someone know? So with the recent change now, would people find out because they sort of stumbled across it, or how would they find out?
I hope that wouldn't be the case, because we've put it out numerous flyers and information sheets. I actually have one right in front of me that shows what the chloramine conversion project's all about.
So the city notified people.
Absolutely. The city notified folks. We have information on our website.
Mm-hmm.
We put out press releases to the media so that we tried to make sure that everyone was very well aware of what's going on. Part of that effort was to make sure that folks that have the fish and fish tanks, as well as pet facilities, pet stores, all that sort of stuff, we're changing our disinfection process. Make sure you are aware of that so that you can use the right material to dechlorinate your water with the change from chlorine to chloramine. If you don't do that, we think that's something that's important to do, because we don't want to have anyone having their fish die on them or anything like that. Also, our kidney dialysis clinics throughout the city, we're very much in tune with their needs. Changing from chlorine to chloramine, they have to change their systems a little bit, and they've been very well notified for quite some time now regarding that.
Well, thank you. I think that's been very helpful to tell us a whole lot about the plant, the water system, where our water comes from, and the new changes with respect to chloramine. And the last question I would ask is it safe? And I guess I should have asked before I started drinking, because I've been drinking water that has chloramines in it throughout this last 20 minutes or so.
Absolutely. It's as safe as it ever has been. And it will continue to be, because that's the goal and objective of our folks here in the utilities, is to make sure that folks here in the city of Stockton have the best quality water possible. And that's what our job is.
So I've heard, last year, there were complaints from some people who said, hey, that chloramine you put into the water, actually back to 2014, I've heard people complaining that the chloramine that we put into the water, it tastes funny, or it smells funny, or there's something different about it. Would you have any comment to anything back to 2014 about changes?
That's an interesting thing. I understand that folks are always very sensitive about their water quality. And as you know, you've been drinking chloramine treated water today, actually. And so back in 2014, I'm not sure exactly why folks were complaining, but chloramine was not even injected into the water system at that time.
So at the time that people complained about the taste of chloramine, it wasn't actually in the water?
No, it wasn't. Actually, we haven't put it in until just this last week or so, on January the 13th. But just because we began the chloramine process in the system doesn't mean it's going to come out of your tap 5 minutes later. It takes some time for it to work through all the city's distribution system.
Well, that's helpful to know. It seems, with something as important as water, it's easy to see how people, can get very excited about it. So
Absolutely.
I understand.
We've got those same calls back in 2014, folks complaining about skin rashes and that they could smell it in the water and all these other things, and that wasn't even in the water supply yet. And as you can see, this is chloramine treated water. The clarity is perfect. Taste and odor, I don't see that there's any difference in chlorine treated water.
I drink a lot of water, and I wouldn't have known if you hadn't told me. All right, well, Dr. Lytle, Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.